Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Please don't come for me. And if you are a fellow listener, you're not going to be surprised. I don't understand the Taylor Swift craze. Yes, she's got kind of fun music, but I don't get it at all.
It just makes me think of, that really common saying, and I can't help but wonder how sincere the saying is, despite how commonly it's used, which is you do you.
You always manage to pull out the nugget at some point in an exploratory conversation. And I think that's exactly what it is. That. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Linnert.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio. And I think everybody who has listened to this podcast has figured out that, we do try to record episodes ahead of time. And so sometimes where we are in our headspace when we record isn't necessarily, the week that we're publishing it. So here we are recording. And what just recently happened was the slew of acting awards and show and movie awards. So the Emmys, the Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, Oscars hasn't happened yet. And I remember that we had a takeaway from last year's award season, and specifically it was is it Michelle Yeoh who won? And when she gave her speech, she talked all about, how she was kind of underestimated or overlooked because she was, quote, past her prime. And it was great messaging to hear and uplifting messaging to hear and see, Michelle Yeoh winning all these awards. And so that award season was very affirming and uplifting for me. And I'm so glad that we talked about it last year. The funny thing is I'm feeling a little differently this year with the awards season. Mostly because for those of you who might not have, watched or even cared, there's often there's often categories of, drama or comedy. And, I'm sure anybody who's listened to this podcast knows how much I love Ted Lasso. And it was Ted Lasso's final season. And of course, I was rooting for Ted Lasso and all of their cast and the writing and the show itself, hoping that they were going to kind of sweep the Emmys, much like Schitt's Creek swept the Emmys a few years ago. And, Ted Lasso and the cast and everybody, Ted Lasso walked away with 0 awards. And the shows that really ran away with the awards were The Bear, Beef, and Succession. And I admit that I've watched them all. Perhaps this is saying something about my screen time, and perhaps I need to, I don't know, step away from media for a little bit. But I did watch both seasons of The Bear, one season of Succession, which we actually talked about on a previous episode. And because of all of the awards, I watched Beef. And I can totally see why those shows won. They're very well written. The acting is phenomenal. So they are excellent shows. But I walk away from these awards shows always a little bit disappointed this year because, number one, the show that kind of blocked Ted Lasso from winning anything was The Bear, which again is a great show. I think it's on Hulu, but to me, it's not a comedy. And I know that there's a lot of online comments that, The Bear is not a comedy. And quite frankly, I've watched Succession, which won for many things in the drama category. And I find Succession funnier and more comedic satire more than The Bear is. I actually found The Bear to be kind of heavy and about anxiety and producing anxiety as a watcher. And I know a lot of people have agreed online with online commentary. And So I just kind of looked at myself in terms of how funny that I lean so much towards the Schitt's Creeks and the Ted Lasso's type of shows. Yet what has run away with all of the awards are these kind of darker,
Mhm.
edgier shows like Succession, Beef, and The Bear. And I couldn't just help but wonder what either is that saying about me, like a dying breed, if you will, of like wanting to see and consume positive messaging and positive shows, or is kind of society lost taste for kind of the positive and the humanistic, and I shouldn't say that because negative emotions and
Mhm. Mhm.
anxiety and those are real emotions too. So those are real human emotions. But what is this kind of shift I feel towards not only highlighting, but almost actually truly awarding
Mhm.
um, the focus on the negativity and the dark.
Mhm. Well, and also just to jump off what you were saying, if we put it in the film category, Oppenheimer came out around the same time that Barbie did, and um, at the was it the Golden Globes, like Barbie didn't win as many awards as people expected, and lost to a number of movies, not just Oppenheimer specifically, but others that had it as like a darker message or that were a little bit more in that kind of that style that you're talking about. And I will just add on to what you're saying with a similar experience I had in 2006 when Brokeback Mountain lost the Oscar to Crash. And there was so much written about what a masterpiece Brokeback Mountain was if you just take it as this heartbreaking love story, of unrequited love for between two people, and yet what kind of commentary is it saying? If And now it's Hollywood, so we also have to kind of keep that in mind. But if it loses to a movie like Crash, which many people felt wasn't nearly as well done or as well written, which is not the point you're making, but what does it say about where society is if truly it can't, or it doesn't want to acknowledge with this type of award, a movie that had such an impact? And perhaps maybe societally, looking at like same-sex love is still not as quote unquote accepted as we may think. So
Mhm.
so I'm with you in using the award season as a potential barometer for a reflection on ourselves and who we are, and or like what's going on in the world, and what are people drawn to that might either be in line with what we're drawn to or not in line with what we're drawn to.
You actually, just with that commentary, made me feel instantaneously better, Zachary. And I have to tell you why. Because the little snippet, it was like a millisecond where you said, of course, it's Hollywood. And I just realized, yeah, you know what? In fairness, I'm actually like labeling and kind of naming society and society's likes and dislikes based on the award season. But then I realized, well, okay, but the award season is not necessarily what is popular or what society thinks. You're right. It
Mhm.
is. It's an industry. It's what the Hollywood industry thinks of those shows. And so again, I can step back and realize, yeah, those are excellent shows. Again, I still beg to differ that The Bear is a comedy, but um just because those shows won the awards does not necessarily mean that it's a statement or they're speaking on behalf of all of society.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, because to your point, Barbie didn't win many or
Right.
any, I can't remember, at the Golden Globes, but what it did win was the new category, which was basically like, what was the best-selling movie, like what
Yeah.
made the most money.
Yeah.
And Barbie hands down won it because it's over $1 billion movie in a
Mhm.
year. And looking at that, that actually speaks to your point of, okay, well, the Hollywood industry might appreciate these certain things about these shows or these movies, but that's not necessarily a reflection of how or what society thinks.
Mhm. Yes.
So that actually makes me feel better. That I'm like, okay, we're not all going dark because, hey, Barbie was popular for a reason, and people are making commentary that The Bear isn't a comedy for a reason. So okay, society's not going all dark.
No, for sure. But your question, I think, still remains, which is for people who gravitate towards a certain kind of content, a certain kind of media that speaks to them and speaks to the kinds of energies that they want to invite into their lives, right? So, just so listeners, I'm gonna w- welcome you into a little off-camera conversation that Elizabeth and I had. She was surprised, and I've mentioned this earlier, but she was surprised to know that I hadn't ever watched Downton Abbey, knowing that I'm such an Anglophile and that Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors, and there's a lot about British history and the Regency era and the Victorian era, et cetera, that I'm drawn to. That it was surprising to her that I hadn't seen Downton Abbey, and because I do trust your eye, Elizabeth, and she was saying, you should give it a shot. I did, but I got to like middle of season 4, and there was one particular plot line that almost ruined the entire show for me, where I just said, I cannot watch this show anymore, because one, it started to get into a place of melodrama that I'm not necessarily drawn to. And there was a plot line that for me is just so upsetting that I just said, this is an energy that I do not want to invite into my life right now. So, because she's so persuasive, she did say keep going. And I'm glad I did. I'm like pretty much at the end of season 6, and I've seen the
But
movies
do you remember
already.
what I said about how to keep going?
Yeah,
What
I
did
was
I
gonna
say about
guess.
how to keep
Yes,
going?
I was gonna
Okay.
get there. I was gonna get there. So you beat me to it. So the nugget that she gave, that you gave, Dr. Ignacio, was just fast forward through it. And just like, once you see those characters, because it's going to be that plot line, just skip it, just go away from it, because there's so much else that's part of the show that's redeemable and worthy, and particularly the banter between like the two matriarchal characters of the show, that there's so much worth seeing and digesting in their writing, and that sparring that they do is fun and entertaining, that you were saying just disregard that, and not even care, just do that. And I was like, you can do that, you can just like fast forward. And you were like, yes, you can do that. So I think I'm giving that back to you right now, which is, there is plenty of content out there that aligns with the kinds of energies that we want to invite in our lives. And you have watched Succession, you have watched The Bear. I stopped watching The Bear because it was too anxiety producing for me. I'm like, I can't. This is not okay. But just fast forward through the stuff that you don't want, even if 90% of the world or 90% of the awards go to them. That I would say that still doesn't matter, because if there's writing, stories, a media that you like to, or you gravitate towards, or that you like to ingest, who cares what the other stuff says, even if they win all the awards, or even if they're the highest selling, or everyone's talking about it at the water cooler, which I don't even know if people go to water coolers anymore. But I just give that back to you because you gave that to me, and it was such great advice.
I still can't help but wonder, just because what's popular is a reflection, right, of what society thinks. And though what's popular isn't necessarily what these what would you call these guilds, these unions are awarding, sometimes they do mesh. And so sometimes what the guilds are awarding are a reflection of what's popular. And it's funny because I was just kind of looking at myself in terms of, okay, well, so if there is a slight pivot and switch to the need for darker, the need for edgier, the need for sardonic wit, that's okay too. That doesn't make society bad or anything like that, because I think we talk about this on many episodes, throughout life, it is cyclical. And sometimes it's amazing that I'm about to say this, but yeah, positivity is too much. And sometimes you just have to, vent or You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I
Yes.
don't quite know because I'm uncomfortable with not being positive. I'm uncomfortable articulating this, but I also very much recognize the need sometimes where it's like, yeah, you know what? Not everything's rosy. And
Yeah.
a friend of mine, God bless her, she was in a horrible uh, motor vehicle versus pedestrian collision, and she was the pedestrian, and she exudes grit and resilience and
Mm-hmm.
embodies grit and resilience. And so she's now about, I don't know, 6 weeks out or so. And throughout the journey, she very much has been like, I can do this, and all of the tricks of the trade of
Mm-hmm.
having grit and resilience, of, well, at least it's not this, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful for that, and all of these kind of tools that I often talk about with my coaching clients in terms of mindset. But then she did post once, please allow me, I just have to say this, allow me this pity party. And then she wrote this post about her frustrations. Her physician had to, or physician's office had to reschedule her appointment, but she was really looking forward to this appointment because she thought it was going to be like the next step in her journey, and blah, 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 blah. And so thank you for allowing me to vent. And it was a post, so I didn't want to like publicly
Mm-hmm.
respond because I just wanted to be that much more personal. So I texted her and I said, friend, I know you and I know you well, and you embody and you personify grit and resilience and positivity. And that's great. But of course, good for you. I'm actually cheering
Mm-hmm.
you on that you gave yourself permission to vent. The reason why it's okay, not that you need my approval, but the reason why you give yourself permission and approval to vent is because you're not one that lives there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you don't
Mm-hmm.
live and abide in the venting and the complaining, but sometimes not venting and not complaining weighs you down. So
Mm-hmm.
when you release all of that, that's what will allow you to push forward and move forward with grit and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this kind of shift away from the Schitt's Creeks and the Ted Lassos, which was clearly so needed and clearly resonated with people,
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID
Mm-hmm.
and during COVID, and even a little bit of post-COVID. Now, I think maybe people are exhausted with the grit and resilience and just kind of feel the need to be like, okay, but we need to vent about this and we need to
Mm-hmm.
point out this. And in releasing all of that, maybe move forward. Not
Mm-hmm.
to mention the fact that, God bless us all, it's an election year. So,
I was wondering if that was going to come up in this episode.
yeah, you know, I, who am I to judge if in any way there was judgment on my part of like, where's our society going to now? Are we being so negative? And maybe no, maybe there is no judgment. Maybe it is what it is. It's a
Yeah.
natural rebound from the exhaustion of having to
Mm-hmm.
have grit and resilience to get through a pandemic.
I was part
I
of a
don't know.
book
I'm
club.
thinking out loud now.
No, I
Sorry.
liked it. And if I can join you in that thinking out loud, I was in a book club and we read I want to say it was the Goldfinch, I think is the book that we read. And I have to tell you, it was a slog to get through. I just hated reading this book. And I'm a part of this club. So like and I've got to do my homework because that's who I am. So I got to do my homework. I got to read. And I didn't like the main character. I didn't really like the storyline. It didn't hook me. And in the discussion with the book club members, I was very vocal about how I didn't like this at all. And I mean, I did have the choice, but I really just felt more like, like I needed to stick with the club rather than the book. I said I wouldn't have continued to read this. And somebody in the club said something rather interesting. I said, why is this so popular? Like, aside from, the critics and whatnot who feel like, I mean, that we've given them the power, I guess, I put that in quotes, to determine what is good or not good, and then their trends towards it. Putting that all aside, like, why is this such an appealing book to so many others and it's not to me? And I was kind of like in your place when I was wrestling with this book. Like, is this the kind of character that people want to see? And why don't I want to see this kind of character? And one of the book club members said, sometimes people like to feel better about themselves, so they need to see another character that will do that. And I had never considered that before, because I want to follow characters. My own propensity is to follow characters that I feel some connection with, that we are like-minded individuals. Like, yes, you may make mistakes, you may F up, and that's okay, but there's still something redeeming about you, as opposed to following another character who somehow is more of a mess up than me, or is like more damaged, more broken, et cetera, et cetera. And that house somehow makes me feel better. I had never considered that before, ever. And because this person posited that little thought into my head, that little noodle, I've always now kind of given that a little bit of credence. Like perhaps people don't want the Ted Lassos because they needed the Ted Lassos to help them get through particularly rough times. And now that they're like maybe on the other side of it, that they're responding to these like deeply interesting characters because they're kind of like a car crash. Like many people rubberneck because they're just fascinated by it. So maybe these characters in some ways make them feel better about themselves. I don't know. I'm adding to your think aloud there.
No, I love that. I love that. And I couldn't help but think as well, um, again, not chastising myself, but just, questioning myself and holding myself accountable. Not everything has to be a do I like it or do I not
Yep.
like it? It can just be. And the reason why I say that, and it can just be a privilege to witness and to observe and to have insight. And what I'm specifically saying, and it's just so funny, I'm 52 years old, and here I'm about to bring up The Sound and the Fury. So is that William Faulkner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, that was my AP English, my senior year in high school. So that's
Okay.
how many years ago? Okay, so 1989. And I have to tell you, I remember like barely anything at
Yeah.
all about The Sound and the Fury. And yet, though I can't recall the storyline to you, the only thing I know is that it's spoken in multiple narrators, like each chapter is a different narrator. One of the narrators, and was definitely the first chapter, was someone that was mentally challenged. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember in what way. So
Okay.
it's so hard to decipher. And that was like the first opening chapter. And I just remember thinking, there's no way. What am I reading? I don't even get it. This
Mm-hmm.
is not grammatically correct. This isn't making any sense. But um, God bless my AP English teacher, Mrs. Andrusik. Her ability to get us to read this novel, and not a question of do you like this character or do you
Mm-hmm.
not like this character, but just what insight do you have in this character? What is this character going through? What is this character's viewpoint? I don't remember anything about the book, but can I just tell you that was one of my most enjoyable
Mm-hmm.
experiences of reading a novel. Same thing too with the brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky. Again,
Mm-hmm.
can't really tell you the story, but that delving into the character's journey, whether I liked the journey, whether I liked the character or
Mm-hmm.
not, or whether I identified with the character's journey or not. In fact, I think one of the brothers Karamazov, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
one of the brothers actually is like kind of evil incarnate, if I remember correctly. So again, I don't identify and I didn't like, and you're not supposed to like that character,
Mm-hmm.
but that delving into and kind of honoring and witnessing and observing the other journey, that character's journey, as opposed to judging, are you good or are you
Yeah.
bad, but just that's a person's journey, how very enriching that experience was.
Mm-hmm.
That was a long diatribe. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I
It's
totally
not
do.
like, why do I have to put judgment on like, ooh, I like this character, I don't like this character, or,
Yeah.
I like this series or I don't like this series. And what does that say about me? And what does that say about society? Shut up, Ignacio. How about just appreciate the journey? Now, if the journey makes you feel uncomfortable or anxious, honor that, like
Yeah.
the bear. But for the most part, like, I don't need to make such a big deal about it, like it's some statement on society. Um,
Yep. Yeah.
just how about that's a journey, and I'm witness to it as I'm watching the show or watching the episode.
But I think that I think the opportunity to self-reflect is also a key takeaway here. And forgive me, I will make a point. You're going to be like, why are you going here? But I will make a point. So, and I have prop right here. I have a Stanley, and I'm sure have you heard about the Stanley craze in Hawaii? I'm sure you've heard about it, right? No? Okay. So So first of all, Stanley is a company that has produced these products for like I want to say over 100 years. Like it's a company that's been around for a really long time. And they had a typically they sell a certain amount of money in sales every year, like let's say like 750 million or 75 million in sales. Well, there's such a craze around Stanley's this past year that their sales like exploded to like 750 million, like a ridiculous amount, because there are TikTok videos about Stanley's, and like there are Reddit pages about them, and then there are exclusive limited releases. Like at Starbucks, there was one, they were sold out at the Starbucks stores in seconds, and then there's the pink one at Target, and it's almost like the old Black Friday stampedes where people were like running in Target to get the pink one and then post about it, and it just like kind of crazy. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't actually say that word. That's not fair. Like there just seemed to be a lot of energy around Stanley's. And because it's a trend, right? And then there's this like belief of like, should I like Succession, or should I, and I'm using that word intentionally, should I like The Bear, or it's won all these awards, so therefore it's got to be good, right? This idea that somehow somebody is telling us that it's worthy or it's valuable somehow means that it has to be to us. Um, and then the binary sets up like you're either you like or you need your Stanley, or you don't, or you like The Bear or you don't, etc. So I have one. I like the color red. This one's bright red, and honestly, it fits in my cup holder. It is the only stainless double insulated stainless steel thing that I have that fits in my cup holder. So for those reasons alone, it serves a purpose. There are some things that I don't like about it, but I find when people see it, it's immediately what you're talking about, which is, do you love it or do you hate it? Because it seems to be so polarizing that there's a camp. And I'm like, are those the only two options? Because there are things that I appreciated about it, and then other things that I don't. But it provides me beverages when I want them, and it helps in certain areas. So I'm with you on this idea that it's one or the other, all or nothing, and that kind of removes the opportunity to find any true benefit from just the item, the story, etc. If we get so locked into it one or the other as opposed to just what it is. Did any of that make sense?
I don't get it. Like I don't get like do you love your Stanley or do you hate your Stanley? Do you know what I mean? I'm
Yep.
just kind of like, I don't get
But
it. So I don't
okay,
know where to go with that.
but I actually think that that's a really good thing to say, because honestly, I haven't watched Beef, but when I started to watch The Bear, I had a hard time understanding where the energy was, like why people were interested in this show. Now it's a piece of media as opposed to a water bottle, right? So like there's a little bit of a difference there. But I also think that just knowing that there's like popular things out there, and then this kind of belief of like why, like what is the thing? So forgive me, I think I've said this before, so if you're new to the podcast, please don't come for me, and if you are a fellow listener, you're not going to be surprised. I don't understand the Taylor Swift craze. Yes, she's got like kind of fun music, but like I don't get it at all. It's cotton candy music to me. So I can kind of appreciate what people may think, but I don't get it. I'm like you. I don't
Yeah.
understand it, and I think that that's an also okay response in all of this as well, which is
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
all of this is swirling, and I don't understand it at all. So I think that's a
Okay.
valid thing to say.
So let me ask you this, only because I had this patient um mentioned Taylor Swift. And so we were talking about Taylor Swift, and I was explaining um uh because my kids are Swifties. And
Yes.
so they because they're Swifties, they have informed me of a lot of backstories, behind each song, and Taylor's journey and all this kind of stuff. So having said that, so here is this uh patient of mine, and I forget what we were talking about. Oh, I think we were talking about like what our favorite concerts have been. And um my husband just went to a U2 concert, which for me, and at least my generation, like to me that's huge. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
you saw Bono. And he
Yeah.
saw it at the Sphere in Vegas. And so um I was talking about how much my husband loved that concert. And so my patient asked, like, what was my favorite concert? And I was about to answer, and I said, but I kind of don't want to answer because it's a little embarrassing, and mostly because it just like dates how old I am. And he said, oh, don't tell me that it's Taylor Swift. And it wasn't that. I'd never been to a Taylor Swift concert. So, but like, he had such vitriol for it.
Mm.
And to your point, you're like, I don't get it, but you don't necessarily have vitriol for it.
Mm-hmm.
He was like disgusted with Taylor Swift. And I kind of didn't understand that either, because I'm just kind of like, you don't care for Taylor Swift? Okay, what's the
Yeah.
big deal? It's like, it just makes me think of, that really common saying, and I can't help but wonder how sincere the saying is, despite how commonly it's used, which is you do you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, so the Stanley Cup, like, the reason why I didn't want to say anything about the Stanley Cup is I don't have emotion about it. I don't like love it or hate it. I'm just kind of like, I don't know, but I'm not going to like make fun of anybody who loves it. And I'm not going to make fun of anybody who hates it. I'm just so neutral because it's just not on my radar. I'm okay with it not being on my radar. I don't have FOMO because it's not on my radar, but I'm also not going to judge somebody who loves it.
Yeah.
And if somebody hates it, okay, that's good for them. But like, I don't know. I'm so, in terms of mindset coaching and
Mm-hmm.
well-being coaching, I think it's really important to maintain or be cognizant of one's kind of emotional energies. And I'm just kind of like a Stanley Cup, or whether somebody likes Taylor Swift or not, like, I'm not going to get emotional about that.
I am
So
laughing,
that's the you
not
do
at
you
you.
thing. Like,
Yes. I'm laughing, not at Dr. Ignacio, but more in appreciation for, and I'll tell you why. As we were preparing for this episode, we were going through the list of topics that we were wanting we threw out there. And Dr. Ignacio shared this one. And I could tell that there was like an energy here. And often, and we try to have an anchor, just some kind of takeaway that we can get to. Now, in this one, we didn't really have one, which is atypical for us. And the reason why I was the one that was like, let's go in this direction, is because having known you for as long as I've known you, and also know how our discussions go, you always manage to pull out the nugget at some point in an exploratory conversation. And I think that's exactly what it is.
That.
Because no, think about everything that we've talked about. Okay, so we started with like award season and how, there's content that seems to be acknowledged and just thrown these accolades, and it's not necessarily content that we like generally kind of like find ourselves drawn to. So what is going on? Is there a reflection on society? Is there a reflection on us? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So as we moved from there into even like your friend who suffered this awful car accident, and then was trying to do all the mindset practices that would help her, needed to have that moment where she posted, and then people came to support her. All along, the message is still you do you. Okay, you don't like The Bear or you don't like Succession? Fine, you do you. You need to have that moment where you invite your friends in to support you because you are feeling down, or you're feeling some sense of doubt about your own grit and your own integrity. You do you, and then invite people to come and uplift you and support you. You want to have a Stanley mug that, okay, why is this such a big deal to you? Who cares? You do you. Like, you just managed to tie it all together in a way that I think makes so succinct, so clear, and gives permission to any of us that forgot that we had the permission that we could give ourselves to be ourselves in whatever way that means. Whether it's a book we like or don't like, or a book, it doesn't really matter if we like it or don't like it. We just go through the process of enjoying reading it to then take stuff away from it, and that alone makes it worthwhile. So I'm laughing in a moment of admiration and appreciation for your ability to find the hook when there wasn't one in the beginning, because we were able to do us.
Yeah. It's important, to tell oneself you do you, and then also give grace to others, that, allow somebody else, for them to be them, right? Whether it's their identity, their name, their pronouns, their preferences,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. We've said it. We've said this on a previous episode, but I think, you do you is more empowering. We've said, don't yuck somebody's yum, but that's even more about somebody else. I love that we are putting it back on Simply Enough, on the me part of Simply Enough, which is do you do you. So yes, thank you for that.
So everybody remember, you do you, because
You are not just simply enough,
you are more than enough.
just as you are,
Period.
period. Mwah.
Mwah.